let me quote to you again, Wealth, Poverty, and Politics, quote, "Without the cultural prerequisites for developing natural resources into real wealth, the raw physical resources themselves are of little or no value," close quote. Tell us what you mean by cultural prerequisites.
Partly, that would be simply the knowledge of how to use things. As I mentioned in the book, the main difference between us and the caveman is simply human capital. Don't forget the caveman had all the natural resources we have today, and he had them in greater abundance because none of them had ever been used up. But he didn't have the knowledge that it would take to turn those to his own purposes.
We just know more.
Yeah.
We just know more. Now, you note a certain productive capacity that certain cultural groups demonstrate. And you can see them because they demonstrate the same, let's call it industriousness, as they disperse to different parts of the world.
Yes.
Germans, Chinese, Lebanese, Jews, Indians, quote, "The productivity is a matter of culture. That productivity is a matter of culture is shown by how many groups have arrived in various countries far poorer than the existing population and have nevertheless risen above the economic level of those who were there before them," close quote. Let's just choose, you name a lot of groups, it's a big book. Let me just toss one at you and see how you do. The overseas Chinese.
Oh my goodness, the overseas Chinese settled largely in Southeast Asia. Many of them came there with little more than the clothes on their backs. There was one Chinese millionaire in one of the countries who had in the foyer to his mansion this stick with a little cloth thing tied to it, because he walked into this place with that stick, all his belongings, and this little cloth thing tied to his stick over his shoulder, and he took off from there.
All right. The Jews.
Oh my heavens, that's been in so many places. My gosh, the Lower East Side of New York, one of the most terrible places when the Jews landed. The poverty and squalor is just unbelievable. In fact, even as late as the late 1940s, when I went to school on the Lower East Side, I'd always heard that all Jews were rich. And when I saw the Lower East Side, I said, why are these rich people living like this? The buildings on the Lower East Side were older and in worse conditions than the buildings in Harlem where I lived.
And they don't live there anymore?
No.
Those neighborhoods have turned over?
Yes. And it went by generation. The generation that was there first, even when they rose up to where they could have moved, they didn't, because many of them were not fluent in English and so on. And so you could live on the Lower East Side knowing only Yiddish. Right. And find doctors, lawyers, anything you wanted, go into stores and so forth. And if you moved up to upscale places like Harlem, which was once Jewish, or to the Bronx, which at another time which became Jewish, you would lose that. The more acculturated people, the next generation who spoke English and were more familiar with American society, they lived in those kinds of places.
Got it. So why is it that in many instances that you detail, you get a subgroup, the Chinese move to Fiji. And why is it then that so often we see the pattern that the indigenous, the people who were there first, fail to get with the program? And to the contrary, not only do they not get with the program, learning the skills of productivity, they tend again and again and again to persecute the groups that came with nothing but achieve a certain level of affluence. So we have the Jews, that's an old story, ancient story, the persecution of the Jews. But you also show it with the overseas Chinese in Malaysia, with Indians in East Africa, and on it goes. What's going on there?
Well, for one thing, there's no particular reason to have expected the indigenous people to have acquired the same skills that the people who came there had. And worse yet, the leaders of these groups are very quick to blame the fact that they are lagging on the other groups who are more advanced. One of the phrases that you often hear that this group took over this whole industry. And in many cases, there was no such industry until they came there and built it. Right. They did not take it over.
Right, right. So those are examples of the way culture can promote or enable economic productivity. You also provide a counterexample, the Soviet Union. Quote, the Soviet Union was almost a tailor-made refutation of geographic determinism. Explain that.
Oh, the Soviet Union was one of the most richly supplied countries with natural resources, and probably the most richly supplied. It was the only industrial nation which has so much petroleum that they export oil.
Right.
They have some, I don't remember the fraction, but they have a substantial part of the world's supply of natural gas, which they're now supplying all over Europe. Iron ore, manganese, you name it, they had it. At one time, something like half the industrial diamonds in the world came from the Soviet Union. The land was so rich that when Hitler sent his army in to invade the Soviet Union during World War II, he had plans to have the railroads take back this land from Russia into Germany because it was that well known for its
You mean just the topsoil? He was going to
yes,
send boxcars of topsoil back to Germany?
That's right.
I didn't know that.
It's one of the most fertile sections and the irony is one of the world's great famines occurred in the Soviet Union.
How come?
Mismanagement by the government. Milton Friedman once said that if the government took over the Sahara Desert, there would be a shortage of sand. And the Soviet Union, it was just that way.
All right. More on social factors. I'm quoting again from Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. This is tricky ground. There is empirical evidence against genetic determinism. We're talking about IQ scores now. For example, there have been whole communities of whites from isolated mountain regions in America whose average IQs have been similar to or lower than the average IQs of black Americans. But while such evidence undermines genetic determinism, that does not make mental test differences irrelevant. So we're not genetically determined, but disparities among ethnic and racial groups are still worth noting, still consequential. How do we put this?
No, you're seldom hiring a whole group or admitting a whole group to college. What you're doing is judging individuals. And the predictive validity is really a totally separate question from the question of genetics versus environment. See, in other words, if the IQ test does not have a single question about flying an airplane, and you give it to people who want to become pilots, the only real question is, do the scores on those tests correlate with the subsequent performance of people in the air?
Right.
But you see, I mean, it sounds so simple when you say it that way, but the Supreme Court of the United States had a totally different take, that the employer must validate a test that is not job related. And so what they're saying is it's a question of whether this test seems plausible to third parties who have neither expertise nor experience on the job. And that would be the criterion for whether it's a good test.
All right.